as Mike said, the title of my speech is Say Yes, and You'll Figure It Out Afterwards. This was a quote that I found by Tina Fey, and I think somebody else said it along the way as well. But that wasn't always my quote. Mine was more, you suffer more in imagination than in reality. So let me back up a little bit. This is supposed to be an inspiring speech, and I promise you I will get there, and you will be hopefully inspired by the end. So I was not always one to say yes to everything and just go for it, as actually I was quite the opposite. So going back to my childhood, which is really where it started, I didn't do well in school, and I was very self-conscious about it because I would have my parents, you know, back in the 80s where they really ride you on getting good grades, making sure you're focused. That wasn't who I was. It wasn't, it just wasn't the way my brain worked. Did a lot of struggling back then. And that kind of carried with me all the way through from elementary school to middle school to high school and then to college. So much so that after I got my associate's degree from college, community college, I went right into the workforce. Now that workforce at the time was part-time. Early on, before I even got to college, I had jobs while I was in school. Burger King was one of my very first ones, and let me tell you, I was great at my job. After that, I had other part-time jobs. I worked at a supermarket, and I was great at that too. I made quiches for a little while as a job, believe it or not. This was back in high school, and I excelled at that as well. So now, as I am an adult, and I look back at those times, I say, I was so hard on myself with school, and I felt that I couldn't really accomplish what I wanted to accomplish, but here I was with these part-time jobs, although they were jobs for teenagers at the time, but I excelled at all of them. But I never really gave it much thought. Okay, I'll do my job, I'll work hard, and I'll keep moving on. After I left college, I did graduate with my associate's degree, and again, it was tough for me, but I got through it. I got my first real job at the age of 23, full-time job at what was then known as Bell Atlantic 9X Mobile. Today, it is known as Verizon. And I've been with them for the last 23 years. So again, those thoughts of not being able to be successful kept haunting me throughout the beginning of my career. I had a lot of fear. I was afraid of failing. I was afraid of not doing a good job. I was afraid of not being able to live up to the expectations that were put upon me in the corporate world. So I made my way through. I excelled again at my entry-level position where I started at Verizon or Bell Atlantic at the time. And slowly but surely, I had some accomplishments. I got rep of the quarter. I got an exceeding on my performance appraisal, and things were all good. But I never really took the time to kind of soak that in and really say, you know what, you got something going here. So I just continued on, lived my life, worked my job, put my head down, and figured out what I was going to do next. So I had some bosses along the way that were supportive and that would encourage me and tell me, you can do this, you got this, this is your job to have, you're meant to do this. And I didn't always believe them. I had what is called imposter syndrome, which is where people say that you're doing a great job, but in your own mind, you think you're a complete fraud because you don't have the self-confidence to believe what they are saying. So with that being said, as I progressed in my career, I got into a leadership role, and I did that. And once again, I had some struggles there because I had people reporting to me now, so that was a whole new dynamic for me. But I had some accomplishments there too. But what happens is, you get so busy and ensconced in what it is that you're doing that you don't really have time to think about the things that you may be accomplishing. So I just continued on my path. It wasn't until about, I'd say 5 years ago, that I got a new boss while I was in learning and development. So now I'm a corporate trainer for Verizon. And that actually is a story in and of itself, because when I did apply for that position and came out of my comfort zone to do something that I had never done before, I actually had what they call buyer's remorse. I got the job, and then instead of saying yes, 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 and figuring it out later, I kind of freaked out at the time. Oh my gosh, I have this new job, how am I going to handle this? So it was a struggle in the beginning, and I had some bumps along the road. But then I got a new boss. And for the very first time, he believed in me. There were other people along the way that did, but not the way he did. And he didn't have to say much to get me to realize that what I was able to do could be outstanding. So I trusted him to let me shine. And I didn't always feel that I could shine because I thought that if I tried, I would just fail, even though I had accomplishments along the way. So that's what the brain can do. It can really mess with that self-confidence. So I continued to take his advice, and I let him let me rise and kind of put me up on that pedestal a little bit, because I said, you know what, after all these years, I deserve that. If I worked hard, I should be able to get that. So over time, some of this fear actually started to go away. And I can't exactly pinpoint when that happened, but all of a sudden I found myself applying to college after about 30 years of not being there. And this was not something, going back to the way I used to think about school, that I thought I could ever in a million years do. And all this manager had to say to me was, you know, it wouldn't hurt if you went back to school. That's all he had to say. Now, my parents have probably said that many, 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 many times. But because it was my parents, I didn't want to, I couldn't do what they were asking me to do because there was too much pressure there. Because that just took me right back to my childhood, thinking that if I went to school because my parents thought it was a great idea, that I'd fail again. But this boss, who knew how to lift me up, convinced me with just those few words, you can do this. So I did. I barely thought twice. I enrolled back in school for my bachelor's degree in adult education. I finished it within 2 years, and I actually graduated summa cum laude. Blew my mind, blew my mind. So after accomplishing that, I felt pretty good. And then other things started to happen. I decided to try my hand at writing again, which I hadn't done in many years. And I got up the guts and the courage to submit an article to Training Magazine, and they took it and have taken about 11 since. Who knew that this could actually happen to me, the person who didn't have the self-confidence to be able to realize that I could be successful. Along with that writing, I actually then was inspired to write a book. And I did write a book. And I self-published it, but it's still out there. As a matter of fact, it's right here. But anyway, we'll talk about that later. So that was something for me that I never would have thought I could do. And that's when it dawned on me that fear is really just wasted energy. And you can't worry about what may or may not happen. You just have to have the courage to be able to stand up, say yes to everything, and then worry about it later. Thank you.